this has been one of the best years in video games history, make no mistake. And in a sense, that makes this a hard decision. But at the same time, it isn't a hard decision, because Street Fighter 6 is just amazing, and it's a pure video game. There's other things, got a great digital representation of Dungeons and Dragons, and we've got, epic stories and all that sort of stuff. But Street Fighter 6 is a traditional arcade-style fighting game, just brought bang up to date for 2023. And it's just incredibly special. This is a genre, this is a type of game that has struggled to exist in the modern world. And it's been up and down, and they had great success with Street Fighter 4 and struggled a bit with the fifth one. And we've seen stuff like Mortal Kombat and other franchises go through the same struggles as well and experiment with big story modes and lots of padding and stuff like that. Street Fighter 6 is just the solution to the problem. It's just incredibly deft in what it is as a package. You've got World Tour, which is basically an RPG. You unlock stuff for the versus mode and for online, but also it's a Shenmue-style RPG adventure where you create your own character and they become one of the legends of the Street Fighter universe. And the genius idea of you train under the iconic Street Fighter characters, and as you get better at their moves and stuff, you get to know them better and stuff like that. It's just brilliant, I obviously split my time between VG247 and RPG site, and even though Street Fighter 6 isn't an RPG, that is, for many of the people who work on that site, me included, in a way, one of our favourite RPGs of the year, just because it's got this one mode, its story mode, that is basically a role-playing game.
Street Fighter has always been about kind of touring the world and having these world warriors and world fighters. The fact that your RPG mode is called World Tour and then it takes you around, it's just another way of lacing that in. You spend the first 5, 6, 7 hours in a New York analog, Metro City, and then you go away from there and turn up into Marissa's stage in Italy, and suddenly it's all really Italian, and you've got all this kind of Renaissance-inspired music kicking off, but with these really insistent drums going in the background. It just nails the vibe completely, and it really transports you, the idea of going on a holiday.
And it's not afraid to break with tradition either, which I loved. The music is still Street Fighter music, it still feels like Street Fighter music, but all those iconic themes that people like Yoko Shimomura wrote for Street Fighter 2, like Guile's theme, Ken's theme, they're not in the game, which is sort of crazy. I'm sure they'll sell them down the line. Each theme tune is a completely different track, but has just little hints and little pepperings that show you it's the same character.
You think about the sort of pedigree of Street Fighter games, and music is in there, right? The Guile's theme, Two Ghosts and Everything meme, it was such a prevalent cultural thing. And then Street Fighter 6 comes along and says, nah, nuts to that, we're going to do our own thing. It's going to be really street and really rappy, really kind of Initially, everyone online was like, what the hell is this? This isn't Street Fighter. But then you remember back to Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and it had this jazz soundtrack, and everyone was like, why the hell's it got jazz in it? But now everyone loves it, and it took a little while to sink in, because that's what fighting games do. You're in them for hours and hours and hours, and these lovely tracks, they just worm their way into your ears. And I think Street Fighter 6 does that so well. I found myself repeatedly just humming those tracks when I'm doing the dishes or walking the dog, and I'm just there singing the awful character select rap that's somehow really good now.
Survivalist, heroic as a tiger is. Earn my stripes cause you know I'm do or die with this.
It's gone past the stage of being shit that it's got good again. And I think it's so endemic of how much effort and time and care and precision has gone into every element of this game.
And then you've got versus mode, and the mad thing is Street Fighter 6 is this huge project, but the versus is the traditional fighting game package. It's basically all the modes from Street Fighter 4 and several that were missing from Street Fighter 5 at launch. You've got a simple ranked match system where you can press a button and find someone to play online through the menu, and obviously you've got local multiplayer, which is a huge thing for people like me. I mean, I had this game at my wedding. I got married the day that this game came out, and so I had an arcade cabinet with Street Fighter 6 running on it at my wedding reception, so people could play on the night. And that speaks to the battle system, right? Because to be honest, me and my mates, the people who play a lot of Street Fighter, we knew we were going to play a lot in the coming months, so we didn't really touch it much on the wedding day. But the people who did sit down at the machine were my wife's friends and older relatives and people who don't usually play games, that's the beauty of fighting games, right? Is anybody can sit down and mash some buttons and understand it. And Street Fighter 6 has got some great like assistance stuff for that as well. And then finally, you've got probably my favourite piece of the game, actually, which is Battle Hub. And Battle Hub is pretty simple, which is it's an online lobby, but rather than just text or whatever, it's this physical space that you walk around that is basically an approximation of a real-life arcade. And so you can sit down at an arcade machine that another online player is sitting down at in order to challenge them. They've got a retro section at the back where they've got arcade machines running like Street Fighter 2 and Final Fight and stuff like that, so you can actually play some old games in the Battle Hub as well. They've got like little DJ decks and places that you can go and actually mix music and stuff like that.
Fighting game music has always been some of the best game music we've got out there. Like, shout out to Tekken 3 specifically, because that's where I like fell in love with it originally. And it had this like rock soundtrack, quite metal and stuff. And I think Street Fighter 6 is kind of doing that again. It's pushing it further. It's doing it with this more hip-hop inspired stuff. And it feels like a fusion of style, technical achievement, artistry, and heritage. And like, isn't that just what Street Fighter should be? All those things coming together and realized perfectly in the soundtrack. I work to it, I write to it. A lot of the stuff you probably read on VG247 has been edited while I've been listening to it. Like, since it came out early this year, it's been non-stop for me. I spin it more than some of my favorite records that are released this year, and I think that says a lot about the quality of the game.
I love arcades, I love arcade culture, but that's a culture that's dying, right? That culture is threatened. And so what I love about Battle Hub that so far no other fighting game has managed to replicate is it gives you the feeling and it gives you the energy, the vibe of actually being in an arcade. It's a wonderful approximation of what that real experience is like, of looking at someone on a machine and almost having a look at their avatar and seeing how it's dressed and stuff to try and get an idea of, does this person played loads of the game? Maybe you open their profile, maybe you go up to the machine and spectate for a bit to see how good you think they are, and then you sit down. You've obviously got a chat on the side, so there's a lot of smack talk, a lot of very funny stuff, a lot of slightly rude stuff as well, and inappropriate stuff, but that's sort of part of the joy. It's all things at once. That's the thing about Street Fighter 6. It is all things at once. It is a competent fighting game package by the standards of fighting games before 2008. But also, it's a wonderful modern evolution with a great story mode that's quite lengthy that you can sink your teeth into. And this fabulous online implementation that basically tries to do justice to the arcade culture that gave Street Fighter its value and relevance and glory at the very, very start. And in that, for me, it's my game of the year.
Street Fighter has always been evolving and it's always changing, it's always doing different stuff. And this new Street Fighter in 6 is quite aggressive for a Street Fighter game. There's a lot of forward momentum and forward moving. And I think, and it sounds so trite almost to say it, but I think the music kind of like does that too. It's pushing forward, it's being a bit more aggressive, and it's being a bit more in your face. And it's doing something really different.
It's so demonstrative of where Capcom is right now, where I would say, aside from Nintendo, they are the best publisher in the world.
The graphics look great, the art style is good. It just works so well with everything that's going on in your eyes, matching to your ears, and I think it's one of the game's strongest victories. Like, Street Fighter 6's music is just absolutely spectacular. I think it is such a perfect little microcosm of everything that Street Fighter is and what Street Fighter 6 is to the series as well. And the fact it has been so contentious, that just means I'm right.
Capcom is in an incredible position, and it's used that position, their engine, their knowledge, their confidence, to create the best version of the Street Fighter franchise, and therefore the best fighting game ever.